Grove Unleashed.
This is State Representative Seth Grove, and welcome to another edition of Grove Unleashed. We have a special guest who might be permanent. We'll see how it plays out.
Trial basis.
Trial basis. Of course, we had the intro from Anders. This is Charlie. Charlie does communications. We still have Chuck. Say hi, Chuck.
Hi, everybody.
Chuck gave up on being on camera. They said it was just his good looks overshadowed Anders and I.
He has a face for radio.
Yeah.
That's the gist.
So welcome, Charlie. Glad to have you.
Well, thank you. Glad to be on board.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get some more of these pumped out here with the budget meetings coming up and the budget hearings and whatnot, and hopefully we'll be able to get some stuff going on here.
Do we need to just finish a budget? Why are we?
We did just finish a budget.
We're going to talk about another budget when we just finished the last budget?
How late was that budget?
Oh, that was really late. It was like
166 days?
166 days, yeah.
166 days late.
Yeah. The big question is how late this one's going to be. I mean, the record is what? Wolf's first budget, we went 9 months. So basically, full-term pregnancy.
The big question will be, Chairman Grove, next year's budget hearings, not this year's, will next year's budget hearings include not just the new proposal, but will it include how we end the current fiscal year with an incomplete budget? If you recall, that was what happened during Wolf's first budget.
Right.
The budget hearings, we had unfinished business as well as a budget proposal. So the governor gave a budget address without
Well, it really wasn't a budget address. He just basically yelled at us.
Right.
It was great.
Which worked great, huh?
Right. So at least I guess we're not in that position. So we do have the governor's budget address coming up on Tuesday. Last year was over 80 minutes. We're hearing it's even going to be longer this year. So,
well, let's talk about location. So,
going
to be a little different this year.
Right. So normally it's a joint meeting of House and Senate in House chambers, but apparently the pool on the roof is leaking.
Apparently.
And we don't have a pool on the roof. I was just joking. But supposedly there was a pipe did burst. So there was a water leak like a year ago that they wanted to repair, supposedly. But our understanding is they're inspecting it to see if it's a quick fix or a long fix. So they may not actually fix it. I sit kind of where the leak's at in the front. I've never seen water at all anywhere on the chamber. But timing-wise, the House Democrats are down a member. So when you have a one-seat majority or tie, they just don't want to go back into session. So I guess it is a good time to look at the leak on their behalf. So we're not going to be back into session until March 18th. We're not on the House floor for the governor's budget address. They're doing it in the main rotunda. I have no idea how it's going to work. I don't know where we're going to be seating because you have to sit all 253 members. Supposedly, the governor normally brings his cabinet and guests because it's almost like a State of the Union presidential where you talk about a policy and then you talk about a person who's impacted by that, like Jeff and Margaret over there. It's that kind of ordeal. So I don't know how it's all going to work. It's going to be a giant mess. I don't know if they're closing the Capitol because it is open to the public. So I don't know if you can just walk in and walk through the governor's budget address, maybe walk up, give him a high five. I don't know.
That'd be something. I mean, you think about normally when around budget time, we do get our fair share of protesters. And we've seen folks arrested. We've seen folks interrupt budget hearings. We've seen the gamut. It's a heck of a lot easier to quiet protesters when they're on the House floor.
Right, because it's limited. You need a ticket. It's very exclusive to get there.
So what if there were protesters in, say, the hallways and they're loud? The governor's not going to be able to deliver his address.
That place echoes like none other.
Yeah, it's not good.
So
great for singing.
Right.
I don't know if it's great for singing.
But are they going to close then the building down, which would mean that the people's capital is closed for the governor's address? It has a little bit of an air of monarchy to it.
You know what they could have done? The Forum building. We just renovated it. It's a big space. Can seat everybody plus guests. It's got a stage, big stage.
You could have session there too, couldn't you?
We could have session there too.
The one thing I want to know for his budget address is A, how many times he's going to mention I-95, and B, how many times he's going to swear, because he's a cool guy.
Right. I mean, I-95 I think is played out. Particularly, I think it comes. What would have impressed me about I-95 is the amount of days it took him to reopen it. It's not fully repaired, but reopen it. I wish that was the average for actually repairing stuff in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but it's not. And two,
Like a roof?
right, right. The other thing is his use of profanities. I think it's very unbecoming of a governor to just sit there and curse when you want to make big points. It takes away from your big points. Like if you need to curse to make it a big deal, then you've kind of lost the narrative that it's a big deal. So I just don't know why. It kind of reminds me of the kid in school who wants to be cool and date, girls to try to be cool and stuff. Like I don't get the need to do that.
Remember, like, learning, like, a new swear word
Right.
when you were a little kid, and you just use it in the complete,
I don't curse.
Oh, I forgot you're a good kid like that.
That's right.
Yeah. Your mom said otherwise, but
Well, I think too, interestingly enough, on that 95 discussion and tying that in with the seal, the leaky roof, so to speak. Recently the governor said, "I am not a roofer. I can't, fix the roof. I can't do all these things." Well, in point of fact, the governor is a roofer. He is responsible for the Department of General Services, who is responsible for fixing that leak.
Right.
So when the governor says, "I'm not a roofer," well, he may not literally be a roofer, but he is indeed in charge of the group who is in charge of assessing and then fixing that leak.
Right.
So,
And I think if the
he
governor
could be
calls
helping.
the DGS secretary and says, "I want to do my budget address in the House chamber, get it fixed as soon as possible," it would have probably been done.
Probably.
a couple weeks, maybe.
But they don't. They decided, they need to quote repair it at this most inconvenient time.
So what you mean to tell me is that it's not necessarily a leaky roof, it's just political games.
I would think it's political games. Yeah. It's a couple floors above too. It's not like it was directly above the House floor. So it's a little annoying. So we'll see. But speaking of the governor's budget address, he had some huge initiatives that he has leaked out early. You have the Basic Education Funding Commission report, which he signed off on and his administration voted for. That's what, $7 billion minimum of $7 billion a year over 5 years. So that's what, $1.25 billion roughly per year he wants to put into basic education funding. You've got the
and before we go any further on that Basic Education Funding Formula Commission, I think it's important to note that not every Democrat voted in favor of that report.
Correct.
In fact, there was one Democrat who voted no. And I want to read
Senator Williams.
Williams, what Lindsey Williams, who's from Allegheny County, former union rep, actually. And I want to read what she said about
Is that the
spending.
same as or different from a community organizer?
I believe it's one and the same.
Okay.
One and the same. There are a couple ways we could do that, and she's referencing funding education. Do we spend some of the rainy day fund? I'm not saying all of it, but there's a lot of money sitting there. How do we use those funds? We have the option of clawing back some of the money that we've spent privatizing education, like the Educational Improvement Tax Credit and Opportunities Tax Credit programs that we just expanded. We spent $2 billion on that. I would say not spending any money on new voucher programs such as Pass or Lifeline. There are also things like legalizing adult use cannabis. There are ways to talk about the revenue, but the fact of the matter is that our court ordered us to figure out how to get to that dollar amount. So let's unpack that a little bit if we don't mind.
I just want to know. I'm thankful I finally know how much we spend in EITC, OSTC, $2 billion. I didn't know we spent $2 billion. I thought the budget was much, much less. Much less per year.
How are we going to claw back tax credits that have gone out the door? And I think it's worth mentioning, too, that the EITC is not just used by private schools. It's used by public schools, too.
Correct. There's tons of educational organizations, from libraries to child care centers that use those dollars. But it's a tax credit. Policy You can. I mean, you could go back and tell people that your prior refunds are null and void, and people are going to have one heck of a massive tax bill. So potentially you could do that. So that's a massive tax increase she's calling on. One time, again, the surplus she's talking about, yeah, we have a boatload of money. It's $12 billion, but it's one time. She's looking for recurring revenue, recurring expenditures of $1.25 billion. That's not going to cover it. And we can go into structural deficit and that stuff a little later.
But she seems to be indicating that 1.25 billion isn't enough.
Right.
She wants more.
Right. And that's literally why she voted. It wasn't enough.
And I think my favorite thing is drugs for schools.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Recreational. Which, by the way, monetarily, that's like $250 million a year. I saw like the highest. When they say it's going to be $1 billion, that's over a couple of fiscal years. So you're looking at maybe $250 million, ramping up to that. That doesn't cover $1.25 billion per year. Do you know what does cover $1.25 billion a year? Major income tax increase, and that's where the Democrats are going to go to fund their reckless spending.
But it's not just the state share that they're going after. Senator Williams also then went on to say, and Lindsey Williams, not Anthony Williams, Lindsey Williams from Allegheny County, not all of it has to be the state share. The court has talked about some onus on local districts that are not taxing.
Yeah, and that's what that report said.
The report itself called for $291 million in local revenue to be raised, which is what? Your school
Increase.
property taxes.
Yeah. So the report the Democrats passed, outside of Lindsey Williams, who said it's not enough, is minimum of a $7 billion increase from the state and a $291 million increase in school property taxes. That is a crazy amount of money.
Well, and it's interesting how they came up with some of this too, because you look at school districts, and one of the school districts in the report was Cumberland Valley, a very large school district in central Pennsylvania that has a notoriously low tax rate because there is a lot of industry within that school district, a lot of warehousing and businesses, which kind of supplement that. And they're saying that they could be undertaxing by as much as $25 million. Okay. So they're looking at school districts that don't tax their citizens very high, but still have very good test scores, and they're saying, no, you have to raise your taxes. How is that a solution for a problem?
Right. And just the $7 billion alone. So covering that is a 46% increase in the income tax. So 46% increase in the income tax, plus a $291 million school property tax increase. And then at the same time, they want to raise even more dollars to reduce property taxes on some schools, but the money actually isn't mandated to reduce school property taxes, just given to school districts because they have higher tax burden than others.
And that's almost $1 billion that they want to give out to high burden school districts to help with supplement, what they're pulling in from their taxpayers. But there was no mention of, well, if you take this money, you have to reduce your property taxes.
Right.
No mention of that. No mention of school property tax relief in this report. In fact, actually quite the opposite. It seems like your school property taxes are going to go up as a result of this report, not down, which is pretty frightening when you actually think about it.
Right.
And I think the other thing that's important to note, Chairman, is that this is a 7-year program. So if the project was to be, if the commission report was to be implemented, it seems to buy someone 7 years before they would have to address this again. And
so we have $12 billion in surplus. The reason we have $12 billion in surplus is because the federal government gave us a boatload of dollars during COVID, and we supplanted state dollars for that. It's one time. So when you use that $12 billion, it's gone. So we have over $6 billion in the rainy day fund and over $6 billion in budget surplus. The goal of the administration, and we had an IFO, Independent Fiscal Office, hearing. They're basically an independent analyst for the General Assembly to review the economics and the finances of the Commonwealth. They do a very good job. Really appreciate their work. They did the 5-year budget outlook. Now, they didn't build anything in for like the wish list of the administration and the General Assembly. It's basically what we know of now. If everything stays the way they are. There's no policy changes. This is the direction we're going in. In 3 years, the Shapiro administration will have eliminated $6 billion in the budget surplus. And 2 years later, they'll have eliminated the $6 billion in the rainy day fund. They'll create a deficit of $4 billion with zero money in reserves, which means in 5 years they'll be coming after your money. Now, there's some certain benchmarks you need to know, too. So he'll have spent $12 billion in one-time fund to increase spending by billions of dollars and then abandon the Commonwealth and hand whoever his replacement is a massive tax increase. And by the way, this doesn't account the $7 billion we just talked about, Basic Education Funding Commission. The $500 million to over $1 billion he is calling on for higher education.
SEPTA.
SEPTA, another almost $300 million to SEPTA.
What is SEPTA?
SEPTA is the Southeast Transit Authority, Southeast Pennsylvania Transit Authority. They do the busing and
Gotcha.
The trains, commuter trains for Philadelphia and then the collar counties around Philadelphia. They move a lot of people in and out, but their ridership's down. The reason they want more money from the state is their ridership is down from COVID still, and their one-time federal dollars are gone. So they want a state bailout because of local issues and their management of one-time federal dollars. And that money will come out of the general fund, so you will have a larger deficit from that. What else was there? The union contracts, that's, well over $1 billion over 4 or 5 years. It's about $250 million a year, and employee benefits and stuff. That's not even counting the other areas he wants to put money into.
Sure, we don't have a full picture
Right.
of all the spending he wants to do, but we know from everything he's talked about, we're looking in the many billions of dollars.
Right.
And what's I think fascinating is, Anders, this was talked about last year as a down payment.
Right.
The budget last year was a down payment.
Mm-hmm.
When you make a down payment, your down payment is usually what, higher or lower than your monthly payment?
Yeah, it's typically, I just bought a car,
So your down payment was
Yeah.
higher than your monthly payment.
much higher, yeah.
So I think that the governor's use of the word down payment was a little incorrect there, huh?
Right. 'Cause your down payment is supposed to lower your costs.
Correct.
His down payment was a small amount compared to the amount of money he wants to put in this year, because there's nothing that's going down. And two, you got to talk about revenues, right? I don't know where he's coming up with this money. I have no doubt he's going to have legalization of recreational marijuana in there. He's a big supporter of increasing minimum wage. I assume he's going to use minimum wage as a revenue source. Who knows what else other revenue sources are coming from? But none of that will meet the structural deficit, which is currently at 1 point. So we are spending $1.8 billion more than what we're bringing in. 1.8. That's current. So that's your base. When you add,
And that assumes that we meet all of our revenue benchmarks.
correct.
Which
we heard from the IFO today that there's a lot of weakening in our economy. Revenues are leveling out, and depending on what the Fed does, federal government decisions, decisions by individuals of curbing spending and businesses. I mean, UPS just laid off 13,000 employees.
Companies
and
everywhere
stuff.
right now they're preparing for something, and
Right.
it's very obvious.
And it's very interesting because the IFO gave a very rosy picture of the economy. Like, it's going to be fine. Growth is going to be at a 2%, a lot less than what we kind of had when we were rebounding from COVID. So it's equalization. But when I talk to individuals and businesses, there's not a lot of confidence. There's a lot of struggle with families and businesses right now. So the economic data and what people are seeing and saying, both from the business perspective and as a family, are two very different things.
I think it's important too when you talk about, for example, gross domestic product, which is really what most economists point at.
Mm-hmm.
The GDP includes government spending.
Right.
It's not just private industry.
Right.
So when the government is able to artificially inflate GDP, you can avoid a recession because of government spending.
Right.
And so, we look at these types of things, and while, yes, GDP may look strong, it is important that we think about all the money that we're spending. Nationally, we've been spending quite a bit of money on war, which is something that does help GDP grow. And consumer spending, again, has been strong, but we don't know how much longer that's going to continue. So even if there is not a recession, that doesn't necessarily mean the economy is in great shape. GDP could be growing very anemically, which means that we're still not as strong as we were, nor can we predict revenue growth of 2.5% or 3% or some very rosy picture.
Right. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the last 2 job reports from the federal government, the largest industry in growth was government. That's where the jobs are coming
That's where the
from.
jobs are coming from.
Yeah, it's not in the private sector. It's the growth of government.
And actually,
again,
last report, there was a drop in warehousing,
Right.
which is usually a pretty good sign that something's coming.
Right.
Not good.
You know what
we'll
that
see.
sounds like to me?
What's that?
Fake news.
That's not fake news. That's legitimate news.
Well, here's going to come some fake news right here. For those of you who are new to this, what this is I'm going to read out a news article headline, and everybody has to guess whether it is real or whether it is fake. All right, we got headline number 1 here. PA man accused of using drone to drop explosives on ex-girlfriend's property.
Huh. I'm gonna say, yeah, that's real news.
If it said Florida man, I would absolutely say it's real.
Right.
But PA man, I'm going to say fake.
That was actually real news.
Wow.
Believe it or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here we'll keep with that theme. We'll go Florida man here. A Florida man was arrested for quitting his job in the middle of transporting prison inmates.
I'm gonna say fake news.
No, I'm going to say real.
And the new guest becomes our new fake news champion. That is real news. Yeah.
Ooh.
White House whistleblower claims strangers drag him from place to place and make him sign papers and read words on monitors, and he hardly gets any ice cream.
Oh, that's a Babylon Bee headline.
That's Babylon Bee. That's fine.
Love me. Yeah.
Which is surprisingly more accurate than inaccurate these days.
Right.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, hey, let us know if we should keep Charlie or not. So maybe we'll run a poll somewhere.
Yeah.
Keep him, or maybe he can join the Florida man.
Hit the
quit his
road, Jack.
job with the
Yeah.
prisoners.
Hit the dump button.
Dump, or keep. Dun dun dun.
One last thing, you now have an Instagram page, so if you haven't yet, go follow Representative Grove at Rep Grove on Instagram, as well as other social media platforms.
Oh, we have a fun new show too.
Yes, Guns with Grove.
Guns with Grove.
Guns with Grove. That's
Check it
another
out,
one
everybody.
coming
Guns
out.
with Grove.
We're going to try to make that a regular occurring series. We'll see how that works out. Also, we have some events coming up in the summer, so mark your calendars or get ready for the announcement. We got a shredding event as well as a concealed carry seminar. So
Is that
keep an eye out.
weightlifting shredding? We're going to get
Yeah, I'm
shredded.
shredded.
Shredding?
Yeah.
No, that's shredding paper. Shredding paper.
Yep.
Grove Unleashed.